is mine! Leave now!
Check the deed. I own it all.
The battle for Serenity Ridge. The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the pines of Serenity Ridge with a soft golden hue, when Margaret's voice shattered the morning calm. From across the gravel road, she was yelling into her phone, her words slicing through the crisp mountain air like a chainsaw through cedar. I sat on my porch, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, watching a deer graze near the tree line. My old retriever, Rusty, snored at my feet, oblivious to the chaos unfolding. Margaret was calling 911 again, claiming I was trespassing on community land and refusing to leave her jurisdiction. The irony? I was rocking in a chair I'd carved myself, on a deck attached to a cabin I'd owned for 17 years, on land I'd legally purchased piece by piece until I held the deeds to nearly the entire county. My mug, emblazoned with "Best Dad in the Blue Ridge," gleamed in the sunlight as an eagle soared overhead, as if it, too, was baffled by the spectacle below. Margaret, who'd moved into a house 3 ridges over just 6 months ago, had declared herself president of a non-existent homeowners association, HOA. She'd even laminated a badge and hung a sign over her garage proclaiming it the Serenity Ridge HOA office. As her voice grew shriller, I sipped my coffee, unfazed. This was the 3rd time that week she'd called the sheriff, and I knew Deputy Tom, who'd shared my turkey at Thanksgiving 2 years running, would set her straight. When his cruiser rolled up, kicking up dust and pine needles, Margaret charged toward it, waving a stack of papers like she was serving a subpoena. She ranted about my violations of community codes that didn't exist in any legal record. Tom stepped out, all 6'4" of him, and gave me a nod before turning to her. "Ma'am," he said, calm as the creek behind my cabin, "you aware this whole ridge is private property?" Margaret's face crumpled, her eyes darting from me to the trees to the hills beyond, as if the mountain itself had conspired against her. That was just the beginning. 3 days earlier, I'd been splitting firewood when Margaret marched up, clipboard in hand, demanding I move my non-regulation compost bin, claiming it attracted bears and caused a forest stench. I explained, as politely as I could muster, that the bin was state-permitted, and the only thing it had attracted was a curious chipmunk. She didn't take kindly to that. "This will be escalated to the authorities," she snapped, snapping a photo of my woodpile before storming off in her lime green sneakers, looking like she'd just walked off a sitcom set. That night, a notice appeared on my barbed wire gate. HOA violation 003, unregistered outdoor waste facility. I kept it as a keepsake, chuckling at the absurdity. The next day, an envelope showed up in my mailbox, no small feat, since the mail doesn't come up this far unless someone drives it from the general store. Inside was a letter on fake Serenity Ridge Property Standards Board letterhead, accusing me of squatting, land misuse, unauthorized cabin expansion, and me favorite rude posture. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my jerky. Margaret had no idea I didn't just own my cabin. Over the years, I'd quietly bought up 1,000-acre slopes, creeks, ridge lines, mineral rights, access roads, even the land under the old ranger station she called her clubhouse. I'd restored that station myself and sold it with conditions that kept it under my control. The paperwork was tucked away in county archives under my LLC, out of sight. To her, I was just a scruffy mountain man. She didn't know I was the architect of the entire ridge's ownership map. What set her off was my absence from her inaugural HOA vision meeting, where she unveiled plans for landscaping rules, curfews, and noise restrictions. I was too busy fixing a fence knocked down by a rogue elk to attend. She emailed me a $500 fine for missing it, CC'd to a legal department Gmail address. 2 words, "Nice try." The next morning, a glitter pin warning appeared on my woodpile. I left it there like a scarecrow for squirrels. By the time she called 911, Margaret was acting like a general in a war for suburban order, calling me the ridge squatter around town. The locals, including the clerk who notarized my deeds and the sheriff who fished in my pond, found it hilarious. But she didn't know that. When Tom told her I owned the land, she demanded proof. I handed him a laminated copy of my master deed map from my porch drawer. He scanned it and said, "Yup, says here you own the land under her house, too." Margaret's face cycled through red, pale, and red again. She stormed off, tires spinning gravel like she was fleeing a crime scene. But she wasn't done up by a long shot. That 911 call was just the spark. What came next would pull in the mayor, the zoning board, and a federal forestry agent. And that's when things got wild. The day after the 911 fiasco, Margaret doubled down. By noon, she'd plastered flyers titled Emergency HOA Bylaws in Effect on mailboxes, fence posts, and even trees I'd planted after a wildfire 12 years ago. The flyers demanded a 9 p.m. light curfew, mandatory meeting attendance, and applications for any structural changes, including campfires. She'd drawn a stick figure by a fire pit with a red X through it. I read one while chewing a pine twig. Watching the wind peel it off my fence like nature itself was done with her nonsense. At the general store, the cashier grinned and said, "Heard you got a new boss." I grabbed beans, dog treats, and maple syrup, laughing as Pete, the owner, said he'd found one of her flyers taped to his cooler and was tempted to burn it. Word spread fast. Margaret was poking the wrong people like the Shepherd family she fined for excessive bleeding after dusk, not realizing it was their sheep. That afternoon, another final HOA warning appeared on my gate, threatening forcible removal or legal escalation. I left it for the foxes, placing a stake on top for good measure. I called my lawyer, Frank, whose voice sounded like gravel, but whose patience was saintly. He'd set up my LLC years ago, and when I told him about Margaret, he chuckled. "Want to go public with the map?" I hesitated, staring at the treetops glowing in the dusk. I'd kept my ownership quiet, not for secrecy, but for peace. Margaret thought I was a loner with a bad attitude. Maybe it was time she saw the truth. Frank prepared a packet with parcel numbers, zoning approvals, and historic transfers, sending copies to the county clerk, mayor, and the state HOA board, who'd take issue with her fake organization. The next morning, I found a sign nailed to a tree near a public trail, HOA Patrol Zone, with a hand-drawn badge. I snapped a photo and texted Frank, "This is getting out of hand." He replied, "You'll love the packet I'm sending her. She'll need a ladder to climb out of this legal hole." By afternoon, the packet was mailed a detailed ownership report, tax receipts, LLC docs, and a letter warning that further actions would be pursued as harassment, trespassing, and impersonation. I knew she'd get it the next day. I also knew she wouldn't take it well. That night, I heard a car slow near my gate. Footsteps crunched gravel, and paper was taped to metal. I waited, then found another flyer. Emergency Board Review Hearing, mandatory for all residents, printed in Comic Sans. Margaret was determined to bring bureaucracy to the wild, but she was about to learn the mountain didn't answer to clipboards. The morning of her hearing dawned misty and quiet, the pines whispering secrets only the mountain knew. I stood on my porch, Rusty at my side, thermos in hand, staring at the flyer she'd nailed to my gate. It read like a bad screenplay, with phrases like mandatory roll call and community restructuring protocol. The meeting was set for 9 a.m. at the old Ranger Station, per a use agreement I'd filed years ago. I debated skipping it, but curiosity and annoyance won out. I drove down with Rusty, his head out the window, eager for the show. 5 vehicles were parked outside: a minivan, an SUV, a golf cart with an HOA flag, and 2 pickups belonging to locals likely there for free snacks. Margaret stood at the door in a too-tight blazer, her name tag reading President Margaret, Serenity Ridge HOA. She lit up when she saw me, mistaking my presence for surrender. Inside, she'd set up folding chairs, a podium of stacked boxes, and a whiteboard proclaiming community first. Her speech dripped with buzzwords: cohesion, enforcement, vision, like she'd memorized a management handbook backward. When she proposed a bylaw banning unregulated porch activities like idle rocking, someone asked what that meant. Flustered, she stammered, "Unsupervised grilling, you know." I nearly laughed. Then she pulled out a photocopied zoning map, drawing imaginary lines to realign lots. That's when I stood, Rusty trailing me, and handed a laminated master ownership map to the nearest attendee. "If you're curious about the real property lines, take a look," I said. The document passed forward, and when Margaret saw it, her face went white. Someone asked, "You own all this?" I nodded. "Every foot, including this building. Margaret stammered about fraudulent paperwork, but Deputy Tom walked in, tipped off by Frank. No legal HOA exists here, he said. Any fake ordinances are subject to county review. The meeting fizzled out, attendees leaving with awkward glances. I paused at the door and told Margaret, "You could have asked how things work here. People might have welcomed you. Instead, you started a war." Rusty and I left her clutching her folder like a lifeline. But Margaret wasn't done. Back at my cabin, I found a county letter in my mailbox. She'd filed a complaint claiming I was running a private municipality, demanding an audit of my permits. I laughed. Frank had already ensured my filings were ironclad. The letter confirmed it. No violations, ownership affirmed. Then came the drone. I woke to it buzzing my roof, tracing it to Margaret's house, where a sign read, HOA Drone Patrol. She was building a surveillance network, accusing me of black market resource activities on a live stream called Reclamation Chronicles. My compost bin, an illegal waste processor. My porch, a structure of unknown origin. I watched from my window, stunned but smiling. She'd crossed into slander, all recorded and time-stamped. I poured another coffee and waited. The next morning, while fixing a fence, I spotted Margaret climbing my slope with a surveyor's tripod, claiming to verify civic boundaries. I told her she was trespassing on deeded land. She insisted the mountain deserved to be shared and cited a civil libertarian advisor. I asked if that was a website or a food truck sticker. She didn't budge, so I called Tom. He arrived, showed her the county land grid, and said, "This ridge, even that stake you moved, it's his." Margaret packed up, muttering, "This isn't over." She wasn't kidding. She filed a petition to rezone half the ridge as an HOA greenbelt with a $20 check. The clerk flagged it as invalid, but let her dig her own grave. Then came a forestry complaint about my permitted irrigation line. Every move she made hit a wall of Fax Me Spring was under a state-approved easement. When I found caution tape on my oak tree labeled Temporary Hazard Zone, I replaced it with a note, Private Property. Legal consequences. Frank said we were nearing criminal harassment territory, but I wanted her to stop because she saw the truth, not a judge's order. The final straw was a folding desk outside my fence, complete with a laptop, ring light, and HOA brochures. Margaret was live streaming, narrating her Reclamation Chronicles, and calling me a rogue squatter. I recorded it from my wildlife camera, drove to town, and dropped a thumb drive at the sheriff's office. At Frank's office, he drafted a cease and desist and a restraining order. "You sure?" he asked. "This goes to court, no more quiet." I nodded. She'd made it a public menace. That night, Margaret set up a tent with solar lanterns and a projector showing mountain misuse, a community under threat. I emailed the footage to Frank. We're past the line. By morning, her tent was gone, leaving a broken chair and a sign. This is not over. But it was unraveling. The county commissioner called, saying they'd opened an inquiry into Margaret's coalition for misuse of resources and defamation. Then a state investigator, M.S. Carter, arrived, flipping through my binder of evidence with growing astonishment. "This is something else," she said, confirming Margaret's actions violated impersonation laws. A cease and desist was issued, with fines and potential charges if she continued. 3 days later, Margaret appeared at my gate, flyer in hand, face tight with defiance and panic. "I'm being harassed," she said. I told her she was facing consequences, not harassment. She insisted she was protecting the community from chaos. I said the mountain wasn't a suburb, it had its own rules, earned through years of respect. She handed me her last flyer, saying she was shutting down the HOA. "No one's listening anymore," she admitted. "They think I'm crazy," I told her. "The mountain reveals people, stripping away noise until only truth remains." She nodded and walked away, defeated. The next morning, Tom called. Margaret had tried to fight the cease and desist, claiming it violated her rights. The station handed her the impersonation statute and noted her house was listed for Celia Serene Home for visionary leadership. I laughed. The mountain had rejected her. Her ex-husband, Paul, sent a letter apologizing and offering to donate the house to the county as a trail cabin. I met him over coffee. He was tired, respectful, and agreed to honor the land's boundaries. The house became a ranger outpost. Spring returned, and the mountains softened with green. Rusty limped more, but we walked the trails, now free of caution tape. Neighbors joked about the HOA invasion at the diner, where one of Margaret's flyers hung next to a moose head. The state finalized its warning, barring her from civic crusades. I cleared fallen oaks, finding remnants of her Empire zip ties, flag stakes, a plastic badge. I didn't curse her. I felt curiosity how someone could get so lost in control that they forgot where they were. That summer, I led a workshop on off-grid living, showing 6 quiet folks how to wire solar batteries and read animal tracks. One said, "I thought this was about living off-grid, but it's about living." Margaret moved to a town 2 counties south, tried a civic etiquette society, and was shut down. I didn't wish her ill. She'd clarified something. My roots in this land, shaped by winters, mornings, and walks with Rusty. Peace isn't avoidance, it's knowing what you'll protect without losing yourself. When the first snow fell, I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, Rusty wrapped in a blanket. The mountain was white, clean, whole. No one could take this snot with drones or bylaws. The land knew me, and I knew it. A young couple moved in nearby, bringing pie and questions about mountain life. Over coffee, I told them, it's not far from everything. It's close to what matters. The story was never about Margaret. It was about standing firm in silence, knowing time was on my side. What do you think about Margaret's actions in the battle for Serenity Ridge? Have you ever faced someone trying to impose control where it didn't belong? Share your thoughts in the comments below, especially on themes of justice, fairness, and standing up to bullying. Let's hear your perspective.